Have you ever felt exhausted by the constant pressure to improve yourself? Maybe it's the endless scroll of self-help articles, productivity hacks, or motivational posts telling you to become better, faster, smarter. You set goals, measure your progress, and push yourself relentlessly. But instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel anxious, inadequate, or even burned out. This is the paradox of self-improvement. The very pursuit of becoming a better version of yourself can actually make you feel worse. At first glance, self-improvement seems entirely positive. Who doesn't want to grow, achieve, and optimize their life? But what happens when striving for growth becomes an obsession? When our worth is tied to productivity, progress, or personal achievements, we start chasing an ever-moving target. The harder we push, the less satisfied we feel. Modern psychology calls this perfectionism, and research shows it fuels anxiety, depression, and chronic dissatisfaction. We're trapped in a loop where effort alone can't bring contentment. Eastern philosophies have long understood this dynamic. Alan Watts, a pioneer in bridging Eastern thought with Western culture, often reminded us that the more we grasp at improvement, the more we miss the present moment. The Tao Te Ching teaches that by letting it go, it all gets done. The world is won by those who let it go. Paradoxically, real growth emerges not from force, but from acceptance. Lao Tzu emphasized the power of yielding, of embracing the flow of life, rather than trying to control every outcome. When we stop striving so hard, we create space for authentic transformation. Think of it like tending a garden. You can plant seeds, water them diligently, and ensure the soil is fertile. But if you constantly dig them up to check whether they've grown, you'll harm the very life you're trying to nurture. Growth, in its truest sense, requires patience, observation, and trust in natural processes. Similarly, personal development thrives not under relentless pressure, but through self-compassion, reflection, and letting life unfold organically. Brach, a modern psychologist and meditation teacher, calls this approach radical acceptance. Radical acceptance doesn't mean passivity or giving up on your goals. Instead, it invites you to accept yourself fully, flaws and all, in the present moment. When you stop fighting against who you are right now, you stop draining energy on resistance. And surprisingly, this acceptance becomes the fertile ground for real growth. Acceptance is not weakness, it is the most powerful form of strength. Let's explore a practical example. Imagine someone trying to overcome social anxiety. They read book after book, attend workshop after workshop, and push themselves to perform in every social situation. The more they try to perfect themselves, the more anxious they feel, because their focus is on what's missing rather than what's already present. Now imagine they shift their approach. Instead of striving to become flawless, they practice self-compassion in social settings. They notice their nervousness without judgment and focus on being present rather than perfect. Over time, they become more relaxed, authentic, and socially confident, not because they forced change, but because they stopped resisting their natural experience. Modern research supports this. Kristin Neff's studies on self-compassion show that people who cultivate kindness toward themselves experience lower anxiety, greater resilience, and more sustainable personal growth. The mind, it seems, responds better to acceptance than to constant pressure. When we stop measuring ourselves against an idealized version of better, we reclaim energy and clarity. But there's another layer we must consider: the trap of spiritual materialism, a term coined by Chögyam Trungpa. This occurs when we pursue self-improvement or spiritual practices not for genuine understanding or growth, but as a way to feel superior or to accumulate status. We become addicted to the idea of progress itself, confusing external markers for true internal transformation. Whether it's chasing certifications, mastering techniques, or collecting habits. We may believe we are evolving, but in reality, we are often reinforcing the ego's desire to control and validate itself. A relatable metaphor comes from climbing a mountain. Imagine a hiker so focused on reaching the peak that they forget to notice the surrounding beauty, the fresh air, or the camaraderie of fellow climbers. They equate success with reaching the summit, yet the journey, the part where true growth and insight emerge, passes unnoticed. Self-improvement obsession works the same way. By fixating on the summit of an ideal self, we risk missing the lessons, joys, and wisdom present in the journey of simply being ourselves. So how do we navigate this paradox? How do we cultivate authentic growth without falling into the trap of self-optimization? There are 3 practical takeaways we can integrate immediately. First, practice radical acceptance. Begin by acknowledging where you are in this moment, exactly as you are. Instead of judging yourself for perceived shortcomings, observe them with curiosity and kindness. This creates an environment where change can arise naturally rather than being forced. Second, cultivate self-compassion. Recognize that struggle, failure, and imperfection are part of the human experience. When you treat yourself with the same understanding you would offer a friend, you reduce anxiety and resistance, creating space for authentic learning and transformation. Third, focus on process over outcome. Engage in activities, practices, or goals for their inherent value, not solely for the end result or external validation. Whether it's meditating, journaling, creating, or helping others, let the act itself be meaningful. By centering your energy on process rather than perfection, growth becomes sustainable and joyful. A real-life story illustrates this beautifully. Consider a woman training for a marathon. She initially sets rigid goals, obsessed with timing and rankings. Each run becomes a source of stress and self-criticism. Then she shifts her mindset. She starts running for the sheer love of movement, noticing the rhythm of her breath, the scenery, and her body's capabilities. Ironically, her performance improves, not because she pushed harder, but because she stopped forcing it. Her growth came from letting go, embracing the present, and valuing experience over achievement. The central message is profound, yet simple. Relentless self-improvement can blind us to the richness of who we already are. By stopping the endless pursuit of a perfect self, by embracing acceptance, self-compassion, and process, we paradoxically create the conditions for genuine growth. True transformation does not come from striving harder, but from understanding, patience, and letting go. Now that we've established the hidden trap of relentless self-improvement, let's explore how this plays out in our everyday lives, and how Eastern philosophy and modern psychology offer tools to navigate it. One of the first things to recognize is that the obsession with becoming better often creates a cycle of comparison. We measure ourselves against curated social media lives, polished success stories, and idealized versions of what a good or successful person should be. The problem is that this comparison fuels dissatisfaction, no matter how much we achieve. Think about it like a hamster on a wheel. You keep running, trying to reach the next goal, the next milestone, the next version of yourself, but you never really arrive. The wheel keeps turning, and the momentary satisfaction of progress quickly fades. This is exactly what Alan Watts warned against. When we anchor our happiness in an imagined, better self, we lose sight of the present moment. We trade the richness of now for an illusion of future perfection. Eastern philosophies, particularly Zen and Taoism, teach us to invert this mindset. Zen emphasizes direct experience over striving. It encourages us to be fully present with what is, rather than constantly reaching for what could be. Taoism reminds us of the natural flow of life, suggesting that growth occurs most harmoniously when we yield rather than force. This doesn't mean you abandon personal growth. It means you approach it from a place of curiosity and acceptance instead of obligation and self-criticism. A practical metaphor comes from martial arts. In Aikido, a student learns to redirect an opponent's energy rather than opposing it forcefully. Trying to control every aspect of the self with willpower is like resisting the opponent's momentum. It exhausts you. Instead, by flowing with life's energy, acknowledging your limits, and using gentle guidance, you find strength and progress in unexpected ways. Similarly, self-compassion and acceptance become the channels through which real transformation occurs. Modern psychology reinforces these lessons. Research on self-compassion by Kristin Neff shows that individuals who treat themselves kindly, acknowledge their imperfections without judgment, and recognize their shared humanity, experience less anxiety, depression, and burnout. They also achieve more sustainable personal growth because they're not trapped in a cycle of harsh self-criticism. This aligns perfectly with what the Buddha and Zen masters have long taught. Liberation comes from understanding and embracing our current state, not constantly trying to escape it. Let's examine a concrete example. Imagine someone struggling with procrastination. They read productivity books, download habit-tracking apps, and create intricate schedules, but they still feel guilty every time they slip. The harder they push, the more frustrated they become, and the cycle repeats. Now, imagine shifting the approach. Instead of beating themselves up, they acknowledge their procrastination with curiosity. Why are they avoiding certain tasks? What fears or resistance underlie this pattern? By observing without judgment and taking small intentional steps, they break the cycle gently. Progress emerges not through force, but through awareness and compassion. Another crucial concept is spiritual materialism, highlighted by Chögyam Trungpa. In self-improvement culture, it's easy to confuse external markers, certificates, habit streaks, productivity metrics, with inner transformation. We may believe we are evolving, but often, we are simply feeding the ego's need for validation. True growth requires shifting focus from the external to the internal, from accumulation to understanding, from achieving to being. When we stop measuring ourselves against perfection, we start noticing the subtle yet profound changes within: resilience, empathy, patience, and authenticity. How do we apply these principles practically? Start by creating a daily ritual of presence. Even 5 minutes of mindful breathing, journaling, or conscious reflection can ground you in the reality of now. Note what you did well. Acknowledge your challenges and observe your emotions without judgment. This builds a foundation of self-acceptance that allows growth to emerge naturally. Next, embrace small, manageable steps rather than radical overhauls. Self-improvement often fails because we try to fix everything at once. Instead, choose one area of your life, approach it with curiosity, and allow experimentation without harsh judgment. This method mirrors the Zen principle of Kaizen, the art of continuous, incremental improvement, without the destructive pressure of perfectionism. Another key practice is reframing failure. In our culture, failure is often a source of shame, but if we see failure as feedback, an essential part of learning and self-understanding, it becomes a tool rather than a trap. Lao Tzu writes, "A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving." Similarly, your journey of growth does not need to follow a rigid path. Each misstep, each moment of discomfort, offers insight and opportunity. Let's return to a real-life example. A young professional named Maya was obsessed with becoming the perfect employee. She read leadership books, tracked every performance metric, and overworked herself to achieve flawless results. Over time, Anxiety and exhaustion took their toll. Then she shifted her approach. She started to practice self-compassion, acknowledging her limits and celebrating small successes. She focused on learning from each task, rather than aiming for perfection. Within months, not only did her performance stabilize, but she also experienced greater satisfaction and creative insight. By letting go of relentless striving, she discovered the paradoxical truth. Freedom from obsession enabled authentic growth. A final point is the importance of integrating acceptance with intention. Radical acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It's a conscious choice to acknowledge reality while intentionally engaging with life.